Welcome to the Jarvis show. Today, we're going to be talking about changing the conversation about inclusion with Jan Peters. We're going to learn how that inclusion is important for engineering and can't be left to chance, that people need to learn to listen and notice more so that teams are stronger and happier, and that people can learn to appreciate themselves and use this to manage their well-being. Jan Peters has been a senior policy advisor on women in STEM since 1999. She set up Katalytik in 2004 and researches, writes and speaks about women and intersectionality. She also speaks about transforming engineering education to be inclusive. Jan has an MBE for her services to women and diversity in engineering. So welcome to the Dawn Jarvis show, Jan. It's really good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you. Absolutely thrilled to be here today.
Oh, it's so good to see you. And I'm really looking forward to your story and actually hearing more about you. The first question I wanted to ask you was, how did you get to be where you are today? You know, you're a speaker, you're a teacher, you coach and mentor, you do lots of things. You've got an MBE. This is a magnificent life that you've had. So how did you get to where you are today? And how do we know each other? We know each other from a mastermind together, don't we? So, you know, that's the power of networking. But yeah, so how did you get to be here today, Jan?
Well, I think if you asked me back when I was 14 years old, what did I want to do? I would never have imagined that I was doing what I'm doing today. And I'd been through the cycle of want to be a brain surgeon, an astronaut, the prime minister, and an optician randomly. And then I realized I didn't want to sit in a dark room on my own. And I think that is the realization, is that, or not in a dark room on your own, but you know, in a small space where you're dealing with somebody one-on-one, it's the same kind of thing day after day. And I just realized that when I was 14, I just wanted to make a difference. And I just enjoyed science and engineering and technology. I loved understanding how and why things did things, but at a really tiny level. Wasn't for me the big astronomy, big picture of the world, which is kind of interesting when I think what I do now, which is very much about transformational change, shifting mindsets, moving people forwards. And so I would never have known that this existed as a role. But what I do is I work for myself, which gives me that sense of control over what I do. My day can be as varied and chaotic as I want, but I know that when I'm working on something and I'm really in a groove, and particularly when I'm working with somebody on something that's really different, really pushing the boundaries and changing thinking, I am so focused. You would think it was my number one talent theme. So focus and patience is something that people wouldn't necessarily ascribe to me. But, you know, when you're in the groove and you're focused on, you're energized by what it is you're doing, and you see that it can have an impact, that is what that I am really in my zone. So to get here, I thought I was going to be a science journalist when I was 18, but that was really about, I think I hadn't been able to articulate what it is I wanted to do, but it was this kind of translator between disciplines. So I ended up doing chemistry and oceanography, that good old careers quiz you do when you're 17 and you've got no idea what you want to do, and you put in your hobbies. Well, water sports, immediately it's going to look at something to do with the water. So yeah, chemistry and oceanography was. Then I did electronic materials, and then I did a PhD looking at solar cell design. And you know, number went to work in industry after I've been doing my PhD. Then I got a job working in the public sector, which was helping commercialize science and technology. And then it was just through some random opportunity for a secondment, I ended up working on women in science and engineering. And I think I found a space where I could see that things could be done differently, and that people could change. That I could see a way to do things that I don't think other people had seen at the time. And so I set about working in this secondment opportunity in the government. And ended up carving a bit of a niche for myself as an expert in understanding what we meant by inclusion, diversity, and equity. And then through a number of other opportunities, I was working for myself since 2004, and phoned a friend because somebody wanted me to create a project around transforming engineering so it was inclusive, and met this amazing guy who was the Dean of Engineering at University College London, and had an amazing conversation with him one night, and we created this program. So I've ended up helping to design a new engineering program that threaded inclusion, not just into the way that people behave with each other as students, colleagues, peers, or educators, but actually threading it into the fundamentals of what engineering is about, which is about problem solving for people. And it was like everything that I then believe came together into this. And as part of it, I was introduced to this Clifton Strengths tool around coaching, and we threaded that into the undergraduate program at UCL. And it just suddenly, everything started fitting together into jigsaw pieces. And that's pretty much how I am today.
That's amazing. What an amazing story. There's so much there. I was thinking when you started talking, when you said, oh, I was thinking about being a brain surgeon, you could have been a brain surgeon if you'd have wanted to be. You could have done all of those things. You could have been a science journalist. You could have been all of those things, but you did this, and you followed your passion, and you followed your problem solving approach, and and used that when you met people and around. I really like what you said about engineering is about solving problems. And when I was preparing for this, I thought engineering and inclusion, that's not a sentence I've said out loud before. I nearly actually recorded that, but it's sort of like it doesn't necessarily come together naturally, but it is natural because it is very important, and engineering sort of like underpins so much that we do. Say, it underpins everything. So it's really important. I know it's really important to you that engineers are educated and they really think about inclusion because of the products that they design, are inclusive. They have to be, or so it also won't work, will they? It's sort of a bit of a full circle for me. And actually, I thank you for that, for sort of like, and I think people don't think about inclusion as pertaining to themselves, but it does pertain to everybody. What do you think about that, Jan?
I think it's spot on. Inclusion for me is so fundamental and at the core of what engineering is about that it's just too important for it to be left to chance. And when I discovered there was not even a mention of or appreciation of diversity in the higher education system, let alone in colleges, I was a bit flummoxed to start with. And it wasn't immediately that phrase, inclusion is so fundamental to engineering, it's too important to be left to chance, came to me really when I was preparing to do a keynote somewhere. And it is because it's around the way that students behave towards each other. And I believe is that in the education system, everybody has the right to the same outcome, which is a really good quality educational experience. And for engineers, it's as important it doesn't matter where you come from as an engineer, you need to have the same opportunity to achieve your potential. Now, you may not have had that at the beginning of your life or your educational experience, but it's for each engineer to learn as part of their core skills, their core management and leadership expertise. Every individual student needs to have that realization that it's their learning is to mobilize, motivate, stimulate, encourage, and raise up each one of their colleagues, whoever they may be, however frustrating they may find them. And I think one of the challenges we find in the education system is that most academic tutors really are at a loss about how to even go forward on that. And therefore, we still have in 2022 an awarding gap for Black students, for students from economic backgrounds that have limited their life choices and life chances. Mm-hmm. And so in engineering, once someone's been through an engineering degree, they're going to, you might say that they're not, they have the opportunity to get themselves a really good job and transform their lives. But actually, quite often people don't feel like they fit in, so they drift away. engineering needs every single engineer they can have. And it's core to the way that the subject is taught and the industry should be working.
I really like what you're saying around that, and I like and I'm going to say people that used to work with me in the management in the NHS will recognise this and wince, but it needs to be the golden thread that's throughout the whole curriculum and everything, isn't it, really? And I really like the way the philosophy that of embedding it in the course, in the, you know, because it's part of everyday life, not that it's like a module on inclusion. It's about embedding it in the course. And I think I really recognise what you say, that people do their degree, do their profession. I'm a nurse, and you know, you may so on the surface of it, you know, you've got a profession, so you've got a guarantee almost of a good career. However, there's a socialization around that. There's the, you know, the being part of society around that. And do you fit into those cultural norms? And I really like that you start with the education in the profession, the education around the discipline, around, you know, what the impact that you're making, and, you know, and how you include people, and how, and, you know, you're absolutely right. And it's not just engineering, as you know, there's lots of shortages in lots of things. Every profession needs all their professionals to work in it, because you're spending so much money training them and educating them, that to utilize their skills and their knowledge in their profession to the greater good. And
you mentioned that your nursing background, and I think there's some really interesting parallels between engineering and nursing, engineers and nurses. And if you think about it, you've got the kind of flip in terms of, in nursing, it's predominantly female people, you know, women that are a profession. In engineering, it's a very masculinized discipline, and quite often the women that go into it historically have adapted and adopted the kind of a more masculine transactional way of being. But fundamentally, they're both professions about people. You know, in engineering, we are around solving problems for people, whether it's a service or it's a solution to a problem, whether it's in a high-tech economy like in the UK, or it's in an economy that's I don't know, somewhere there where there's a lot of farming going on, but how can we help improve their lives? And one of the other challenges is about where are we getting the raw materials for all the infrastructure, for the technology we're creating? And what's the impact on those people's lives? So they're both professions that are profoundly about people, very different ways. But nobody enters nursing to work on their own. And I don't know of any engineers that work on their own. They work with people all the time, as users and as clients and customers and colleagues. Same in nursing.
So true, so true. The parallels are definitely there. And you talk also, you know, again, about people not working by themselves, and you know, people work in teams. No man's an island, or whatever project you're doing, whatever you're doing. And there's lots of engineers that work in the health service, as you know, and you talk about that people need to listen to each other and notice each other, so people can learn and interact better. So talk to me a little bit more about that, Jan.
Yeah, so you know, we when we go through all our management courses and leadership, we talk about, and even as students, you know, like we talk about listening skills, active listening. And it struck me when that when we talk about active listening, people think about it as being like nodding your head, your body language, and being present in the moment. And we also talk a little bit about asking questions, open questions, not closed questions. But we don't when we're, or in my experience, most of the places I've been and encountered listening skills, it doesn't go beyond that. And I don't know about you, but when you're having conversations with people, we can very easily enter into a kind of echoing, relationship, rapport building process where we're listening to. So if you were telling me a story about your friend, your partner who was ill, or some trauma that had happened, and what I found in the past is you're busy thinking, almost playing top trumps. Oh, I know somebody who had that. And you end up having this kind of, oh, I know someone that, I know someone who's broken the leg, oh, mine a spiral fracture. And anyway, so that's kind of like a flippant way of looking at it. But if we're not careful, we're too busy thinking about what we're going to say next, rather than really trying to understand what you're telling me. And so I'm not thinking enough about being present in the right kind of way. And so there was a coach talked to me once, and he has this approach of, and he calls it notice, listen, question. And it's also about going to that deeper level. And it's the sort of, the body, the mind, and the sort of language that you're using in terms of helping me to understand what it is that you're telling me. And so the technique that I use with students is to start up getting them to ask questions. And one of the tricks, it's the Michael Bungay Stanier book, which is Ask More, Listen. And the title of the book, and it's usually Sitting on My Side. And it's
We'll
basically about ask better questions. I can send you the link to put in the chat afterwards.
Yes.
And it's blue and yellow book. And one of his 7 questions is start with what. So Michael, Simon Sinek says start with why, but Bungay Stanier says start with what. And if you ever try just starting questions with the what, it's really interesting how it shifts the whole conversation. But when someone's telling you a story, if you say to them, what happened next? Okay. So immediately you're interested in what happened next, but also what were you feeling? Oh. And the person who's telling the story might pause and go, I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, I was a bit scared, was a bit nervous, was a bit worried. And what was the impact? What was the impact of that? And it's really interesting how it really shifts the conversation to one that you are actually genuinely interested in. But it also makes the storytelling by the other person, rather than a very long rambling saga, it might require you to do a little bit of interrupting. But occasionally it's okay to interrupt. But it makes the other story being really interesting and much richer, and lessons can then be drawn out and learned. So I think that learning to listen better and deeper is something I love to try and practice. And I try and as well to then encourage group coaching in my business. I give people those sort of techniques and tools so that helps them when they're practicing coaching in their breakout groups. And so they're not just learning they're being coached, they're actually learning how to be a better coach or a better manager.
And I think not everything is about inclusion, or maybe everything is about inclusion, but I think it helps in those discussions that you have. So if you can ask questions, people think you're interested, and you are interested because you're asking the question, even by asking the question, you're noting that you're letting the person you're talking to know that you're interested in what to say, and not just thinking about what am I going to say. And that makes it a different conversation. It makes it a more connected conversation, and it makes it more of an inclusive conversation, because it's not just I'm telling you all about me. I'm interested in you, and I'm really interested not just in what you say. It's a bit like, how are you, and sort of like the Great British thing, and say fine, so what does fine mean, and
my line manager used to wander in, did management by walkabout once, and he sort of was really proud of the fact that he took time most days to go and see people, but he would say, how are things going? Which is, to me, is the worst question in the world to ask anybody, because the only answer really is fine. And not what do you want to achieve today? What would make today good and successful from your perspective? So, much deeper question. So that questioning is really important. But the thing about listening and inclusion, and like this, my push to change the diversity and inclusion conversation, is that people actually do want to be noticed and do want attention. And by giving them that, by listening to them, you are giving them your time and giving them the attention. And then that is going to give you the build trust between you. and immediately will bring you closer together, and it will lift up that other person, because you'll be able to start understanding the challenges that they're facing on a day-to-day basis. And I think having that conversation and developing those listening skills within our student populations is really vital to create a community of, I suppose it's a community of practices. It's really a way of being that lifts everybody up, and it becomes immediately less competitive. And it also becomes something that when students then go to interview, they're able to say, I like to practice how I can have better conversations with people because I like to learn to listen. And one of the projects that I worked on at the beginning of this journey with UCL was we were creating 3 scenarios for students to work on. And one of the people we interviewed was the chief engineer for the Highways Agency. And we asked her about leadership, and she said, leaders always, what's the greatest skill and attribute? She said, leaders always listen. And I think great leaders always listen, but I'm not sure that leaders always listen. And I think that's a really important differentiator. And
Yeah.
because again, it's about giving that attention. I think it's just a fairly small shift in behavior that we're then asking people to make, which then opens up a whole new landscape of, as manager as coach, and manager as being interested in people. And it just fits into that whole kind of total quality environment where we're thinking about, health, safety, well-being, and the environment. And that by listening more, we are going to lift and be focused on well-being of individuals. And that is so important these days.
Yeah, that's really, really good. And I really so one of my sayings is the greatest gift you can give anyone is your attention. And you've really sort of fleshed that out a bit, because it's the signaling of interest. It's sort of like building rapport, community. And also I like it as it's an actual skill and an actual thing that you can say, oh, one of my skills is listening, and how I can demonstrate it is by doing the method that you suggested. So that is really good and really important. And I also like how you linked it to leadership and to management, and how you can use that, because I hear what you're saying about you can listen but be thinking about what you're going to say. You can listen and not act on what's been said, but there's a skill, isn't there, about sort of like listening. So what's that saying? How's that person feeling? How are they going to get the objectives that you want them to do as your boss, as their leader, to do, and how are they feeling about it, and how can you help as well? So there's lots of things you can get from that information. So yeah, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. So you also, this podcast is about health and well-being, and I'll come talk about your health and well-being in a bit, but you also say that people need to value and appreciate themselves, and that it will help their health and well-being. And there is a movement, is there, about self-love and self-care. But I sort of wanted to get your take on it, Jan.
I think, as a strengths coach, what the focus is around focusing on what you do right, not on what you do wrong. Mm-hmm. It's referred to as positive psychology, and I'm certified in the Clifton Strengths tool, and having a vocabulary and a language to talk about the things that are core to your being is really amazingly important. But it allows you to then do self-reflection and notice when you're using your top talents and when you're in your strength zone. And it means that when you're not feeling so good, you can then go back to your reports or to a previous reflection and think, what do I need to energize myself? What am I doing when I'm feeling really buzzed? Although I think some people use buzzed in a different kind of way. But I'm in it as in like a really excited, energized state, naturally, not medically induced.
Yes.
And I think it's around. So when over the last year, I've kept myself sane by being involved in a number of different global groups and a couple of different book masterminds where we read business books. And one of them was the Gallup have brought out this wellbeing at work book. And at the same time, I was involved in a local business mastermind group, peer learning network. And we took it in turns each month to go and share a challenge that we were facing in our business. And there are people from all sorts of different kinds of businesses there. And at one of them, there was a guy who was really quite an organized, structured guy. And he said, and I gave an overview of what I do, my business, my community contribution, which is creating a science centre, but supporting the local residents network too. And he sat there and he said, Jan, do you not think you're doing too much? And I went, oh. So I left the meeting and I drove home, and I was thinking, wow. Anyway, that night I was doing the wellbeing at work book with loads of Clifton Strengths coaches. And one of them in the breakout room said, yeah, Jan, when do you find time for you? So I went, oh, so that's 2 people in one day have said, are you doing too much? So as part of the book group, we were creating a grid of all our Clifton Strengths and the 5 areas of the Gallup wellbeing framework, which is, can I remember them? And one of them is social, physical health, and why can't I remember them? I know them so well. Anyway, and financial and
okay, cool.
Not family. Anyway, so anyway, one of the ones I looked through my profile, and it was basically I get energized by doing things and being busy, but helping to connect and energize other people. And it even all in the book, what's so useful about it is he said if you're a person who's got activator and likes to work in a group and energize other people, it said find yourself a social community project to get involved in. I was like, oh, tick. And then it said under the physical one, it said, so you like to interact because of your profile with other people. So rather than trying to beat yourself up by having a detailed schedule of doing things on your own, find a community group to connect with and organize it and energize yourself by energizing other people. And I thought, oh, so I play in a mum's community rugby team where we raise money for a mental health charity, which is Papyrus and the Red Lipstick Foundation, which supports teens with mental health challenges. So we've all, over the last 4 years, rather than standing on the sidelines, and we meet on a Monday night and we in the freezing cold and we throw a rugby ball around and we're becoming, I wouldn't say competent, but we have an absolute blast. We've got a great community of sisterhood. We support each other, and it's an amazing space to both get fit, stay fit, and connect with each other. And so rather than me sitting down and saying, I won't do that, I won't do this, I'm energized by trying to bring science and engineering into my community and creating a science centre. And there are times when I roll my eyes at myself and I don't want to go to another meeting. But the next thing someone says is, could we write a funding proposal on this? And who's straight there? And I love doing it. So I'm energized by making a difference. When somebody says to me, Dan, just sit down, chill, have a glass of wine, it's not me. So I think knowing who you are and where you get your energy from is really important. I know that for me, I'm quite a cerebral thinker. So actually, if I need to go for a walk on my own, and I do try now to build back in the commuting time that I've lost, which means going out with some podcasting or actually making myself go and visit somebody who lives an hour's drive away so that I've got an hour to just let my brain mull around in the car.
I love that.
I don't think many of us, those of us who haven't perhaps realised that we do need space to think, not space to just relax, but actually space to just let our brains chunder around. That those of us who enjoyed commuting for whether we could read, we could chat, we could sleep, we've lost that. And so I've only recently rediscovered how important that was for me. So yeah, I've realized that I need to manage my energy by being busy, because that's what energizes me.
I love that, Jan. And I really, really love what you said about building back in the commuting time, because I was talking to my son last night about this, about where I said there's too much stuff that I could read, I could watch, and I haven't got time to do it. And I have said that for during this pandemic and all this time I've been having my business and working at home, I said I used to listen to things when I was either driving to meetings for my work or I was commuting on the tube. And I haven't got that anymore. And you've come up with a solution. The solution is to build that time up, even if it's to go for a walk during that time that you would have, the hour, half an hour that you would have taken to go, that I would have taken to go into town, into work, into Waterloo. It's sort of like, that was the time I listened to podcasts, that's the time I listened to music, and sometimes I did nothing. I just was alone with my thoughts because there was no other time that I could just sit by myself. So I used that commuting time. So I think that, and you're right, it's so valuable, we've lost it. Yeah. So I literally get out of bed, have my breakfast and start working, and I don't have that time to think or plan the day or what I'm going to do, or even to scroll through social media that I used to do when I was on doing my commute. So it's really important to sort of like put that time back in. I really like that. And I also like that you is to look at your strengths, what energizes you, what motivates you, what makes you happy, to look at the things around how you're going to do your health and well-being. So I come from a rugby family, so loving the fact that you're part of a female rugby group, and that you get a lot of joy out of that. But it doesn't have to be that, it has to be something that gets you energy, and whatever you're doing. So I get energy, I don't know, from podcasts, but was really struggling to find the time. But it's sort of like how can you build that into your day? So that is fantastic, Jan. We also, because so we talked about the Clifton strengths, and we talked about another book that I can't remember off the top of my head, but I will for the show notes. And I also asked you sort of like what is your favorite book, and you chose a book that isn't. I don't think it's a self-help book or a learning book. The Gentleman in Moscow.
Yeah. And that's, I do commend people to read it, because it's beautifully written, really phenomenal writing, but it's a beautiful story too. And I started reading it as part of a book group that I'm in, and a face-to-face book group normally, and we started reading it in, I think, for March 2020, which was right at the beginning of lockdown. And the character is confined to a very nice hotel in Moscow for crimes against the state. But he's, rather than not into a nice room, which is where he would have stayed in that hotel, but into the attic, where there's all sorts of bits of junk, and there's connected rooms, and there's a room with a door that he finds that nobody else knew. And it's the story of how he is incredibly resourceful and builds and makes the best of his life. And it really struck with me, and this isn't why I liked it, but it just struck a chord with me as I was at the beginning of lockdown, when we were realizing that we are confined pretty much to the boundary of our property, however big or small that might have been. But that same feeling as he's trudging up the stairs, but also the realization it doesn't have to be like that. But it's just the fact that it's such a great story and it's written so well. And there's a few kind of cameos of characters that just come in and out of the book. And one of them is a small girl in a bright yellow dress in his drab life. But the fact that she was in a yellow dress, I loved. And she came into his life and really pushed him out of his comfort zone. She was probably about 10 or 11 at the time. So I love it on many different levels. And also whilst I love the ending, it ties things up, but actually not in a sugary sweet kind of way. So I love that. I do have another one that I didn't recommend, which was Atlas Shrugged. Don't know if you've read that, by Ayn Rand.
No, I haven't.
It's like 800 pages long. And but I didn't realize it was written in the 1950s until I'd finished it and looked at the front of the cover. I thought it was written in the sort of 90s or noughties. But I do, read, absolutely everybody should read The Gentleman in Moscow.
That's fantastic. So I know that you do lots of things. I know you do contracting, I know you do consultancy, you speak, and you also have you know, community groups that you run yourself and that inspire people through. How can people, so first of all, is there anything that you'd like to share with the audience so they can work with you? And then how can people get hold of you?
Yeah, no, great, thank you. So I run an engineering community group, which a free one called Live Lounge. We meet every month, and that's for people generally interested in how to embed inclusion into engineering education, whether it's further or higher education. And then if people are interested in the Clifton Strengths, we do a free Strengths Jam every month as well. But we also have a coaching group called Momentum Coaching. We run it monthly for those who wish to join monthly, but we also have a 3-month coaching group, which is open at the moment and closes next week. And that is a group coaching for small groups of 12 people who join us for 6 coaching sessions for an hour every 2 weeks, using the Clifton Strengths tools. So people are learning some coaching strategies and practicing those, but they're also being able to focus on their own internal goals, bring challenges. And the one thing I really, really love about group coaching is you've got a hive mind of solutions that people can offer, but you also hear other people's challenges, which even if that's not a challenge that you've brought into the group, it allows you to think, oh, that's interesting. So when you come across something in the past, you've either got a connection in your new network to go to for insights and to explore whether it might work, a solution might work for them, or you've just got an extra bit of enriched your experience and knowledge. And you learn about 12 other people at the same time who have got very different and diverse backgrounds and different strengths profiles. So how do you get in touch with us? Well, we're on katalytik.co.uk, which is Katalytik. We come up pretty high in search engines if you do Katalytik Jan Peters, but we've also got LinkedIn, we're on Facebook and Instagram, and we're on Linktree as Katalytik Limited.
Brilliant. And all those notes will be in the show notes wherever you're listening or watching this. So this has been fantastic. Thank you so much, Jan. And I really like your different perspective on inclusion, you know, on diversity, on equity. I really like what you talked about listening and how people can use that and how people can learn from others as well. Is there a message that you would like to share with the audience as we before we go?
Yeah, I think some people might wonder why listening is something that I think is so important to equity, diversity and inclusion. And I think it's because for so long there's so many people that haven't been heard. And it's not that they haven't been talking about the challenge. It's just that people have, I don't know if chosen not to hear them is the right phrase, but they've been focused on something else. So they've been deaf to them. And so we need to listen both, we need to notice when people are contributing or talking. We need to not think people are whinging or complaining, or if you're in a minoritized group in a company or an education sitting, minority group chatting, they're not plotting anything, they're just having a bit of me time. But equally, we need to be able to listen so we can change things to improve where we work and ultimately work towards creating a place where people can be happier. Pretty simple, really.
Very simple, and I love it. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. That's it for the Dawn Jarvis show today. If you like what you heard, please like, listen, subscribe and share, and I'll see you soon. Take care.